Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Nonprofit Learning Lab for today's workshop.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to the Community IT Innovators webinar. We're so happy that you're hosting us today, Nonprofit Learning Lab, and we're going to be talking about creating value by designing an IT roadmap for your nonprofit. So I know planning for IT is one of those things that nonprofits have to do, and it can be a little scary, might make you feel like you have to do it, but it's overwhelming. So today we're going to take you through some steps of how to think about it, and then some practical steps on how to put that roadmap together, and then create actual timeline and steps that you can take to improve your IT. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT, and I'll be the moderator today. Before I came to Community IT, I was, believe it or not, the IT Director at a couple different nonprofits, large and small. So I know what you're going through, and I've been there. I know it's hard to figure out even how to put a roadmap together if you're not an IT person, which I definitely was not. So I'm very happy to be here today with Johan, who's going to help us think through it. So Johan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. And my thanks to the Nonprofit Learning Lab for hosting this webinar today. We're really excited to be presenting on this topic. I'm the CEO at Community IT. I've been with the company for over 20 years. Actually started on the technical side and worked directly with a lot of nonprofit organizations in helping them to use technology more effectively. I moved into management about 15 years ago and became the CEO of Community IT in 2015 when our founder, David Deal, left and sold the company to the employees.
So before we begin, if you're not familiar with Community IT, a little bit about us. We're a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. So we provide outsourced IT support. We work exclusively with nonprofit organizations, and our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish your missions through the effective use of technology. We are big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit. We serve nonprofits across the United States, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. We are technology experts, and we are consistently given the MSP 501 rating for being a top MSP, which is a recognition we received again in 2022. So I do want to remind everyone that for the purpose of these presentations, we are vendor agnostic. So we only make recommendations to our clients once we have their IT roadmap in place of what they need to do and the licenses they need to have and all of that. We do consider ourselves a best of breed IT provider. So it's our job to know the landscape, what tools are available, reputable, and widely used. And we make recommendations on that basis for our clients, based on their business needs, their priorities, and their budgets. So I invite you to join us for our monthly webinar series where we cover other IT topics for nonprofits. You can check out our podcast. We have a YouTube channel as well with lots of free resources. So we really believe, and we are so lucky to be working with Nonprofit Learning Lab on this too, to provide a lot of resources free to our community so that everyone can do IT better. All right, and with that, I want to go through our learning objectives for today. So how to set priorities, how to start designing an IT roadmap from your priorities, how to allocate budget, time, and your staff energy. That's something we'll talk about. How to understand change management and the capacity of your nonprofit. And then we will get to project timelines and planning steps. So we have a lot that we're going to cover today. We're going to try to leave as much time as we can for some Q&A. And first, we are going to start out with a couple of different polls. So poll number one, what is your role in your organization? And you could have the options to be a team member, a manager, a director, executive level, CEO or C-level, or this is not applicable. So it looks like we have about 3/4 of the people have voted. So Johan, can you see that? And if you can, would you read the results?
Yeah, I can see it. 40% of the respondents are team members, 20% are managers, another 20% directors, and another 20% at the executive level. So pretty even distribution across those 4 different categories.
Excellent. All right. And we're going to skip right ahead to our next poll. So at your organization, who does IT report to? And this really can be so different in different organizations. So your options are IT reports to the CIO, a Chief Information Officer, or the CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. So someone at the C level. Number two, IT reports to an IT director, who then reports to someone else. Number three, IT reports directly to the CFO, the COO, or the executive director. So your chief financial officer, your chief operations officer, or your executive director. Number four, which is also very common, there's only me in my organization and I do it all. And number five, other or not applicable. So you do have IT, but it doesn't report to one of these different categories. The first two are really kind of in the IT area. So a C-level person that is responsible for IT, or an IT director who then maybe reports to the executive director or to the CFO, or IT sometimes reports directly to the finance operations or executive director, or maybe there's only you and you are the one doing it all. All right, so I think that we have pretty good response on this one as well. Johan, do you want to read the results?
Yep. 5% of respondents have IT reporting to the IT director. A quarter, 20%, 27% have IT reporting to the CFO, COO, or executive director. Another quarter, 23%, it's only you and you do it all for IT, and then about half, 45%, are other.
All right, that's great, very interesting. So everyone who's out there doing it all yourself, we see you and we appreciate you. All right, so we have one more while we're all feeling interactive. So the third poll is, how do you manage IT now? So your first option could be, we have a well-defined process annually. Second option is we have an ad hoc process. Third option, it's every department for themselves. So there may be a process, but it's by the different departments do their own thing. They may or may not have a process internally, but there's no organization-wide process. Number four, we don't have an IT strategy. If that's you, you've come to the right place. There's no judgment and no worries. We're here to help you. And then number five option is other or not applicable. So you can see there's a range, and I just want to emphasize again, like, there is no shame in falling in any of these categories. It's nonprofits span from very large to very small, have all different levels of tech savviness. So just being in this webinar means that you want to have a IT roadmap. So go ahead and get your answers in. Okay, I think we have pretty good response there. And Johan, would you like to read it?
5% have a well-defined process annually. About 50% have an ad hoc process, 40% don't have an IT strategy, and then 10% are in the other category.
Excellent. Okay, so that was really very informative, and I hope that if you are in this webinar that maybe you feel like there are other people who are in your same boat. So that's a good thing about doing that, those polls, and kind of showing people where they are in the process. So our next learning objective that we're going to start out with is setting priorities. And Johan, I'm going to turn this over to you. We often say that people need to start with an assessment at their nonprofit. So can you talk a little bit about how you do that and how people might go about it?
Yeah, I think so. In some ways, what a roadmap is a statement of priorities. What do you need to do, and when are you going to do them? What comes first, and then what comes next. So that at its simplest level, that's basically what an IT roadmap is. And it's helpful to have that written down so that it can be communicated to other groups in the organization, particularly leadership. With any luck, you have a board that's engaged in a healthy way with the organization and might be interested in knowing what the IT roadmap is. But fundamentally, an IT roadmap is a statement of organizational priorities. What's the most important thing that the organization needs to work on? So in order to make those decisions and identify what needs to be focused on first, what are the highest priority items that the organization has, you have to know where you are. You have to have an understanding of where things stand with IT in the organization. And that's why an assessment is so important. And we typically recommend an assessment as the first step in developing an IT roadmap. And that sounds fancy like that. I think sometimes people get intimidated by, oh, IT assessment, I'm going to have to go hire an expensive consultant to come in and it's going to cost a lot of money and I'm going to have a long document. And that may be true for larger organizations that are more complex in terms of their structure and the work that they're doing. But for smaller organizations, an assessment could just be a very simple, just a 1-page, 2-page Word document where you try to document as best you can the IT that the organization has. So, that's a snapshot. Is a great place to start. Now, for more mature and more sophisticated organizations, that extensive report may be necessary. So it really depends on your organization, the size of the organization, your operational maturity, and you'll have a best sense, what is going to be appropriate for you all. You can also, and whoever has responsibility for IT for your organization, like whoever's solving the IT problems as they come up, and maybe your IT department, you may have outsourced IT to somebody, you may have an accidental techie in the organization, you may be the accidental techie. Anyone who's responsible for IT is basically, should be the first place you go to develop the assessment. They should have the expertise and the understanding of IT in the organization to basically, put together a list, like an inventory. Here's what here are all the IT systems that we have that the organization uses. That can be hardware, it can be software, it can be cloud applications. Just make it as exhaustive a list as you can. And then for each system, identify, is it meeting our needs? Is it not meeting our needs? Is there a risk involved in this system, or is it relatively stable? Are there gaps? Are there things that the organization is trying to do that it can't do because it doesn't have the IT system in place? So that's essentially, at a very basic level, what the assessment is. And it's something that's going to be unique to your organization. And as I mentioned earlier, and once you get that list, that assessment of that inventory of IT systems with an evaluation of where the systems are and how well they're meeting the needs of the organization, then you can start to prioritize that list, and that kind of leads you into developing the roadmap.
I love saying that it can be a Word document because I think a lot of people think, oh, there's a template or there's a specific way that I have to document this. And really, you can just sit around yourself or with some people in your department or in your organization and you can do it on a whiteboard, you can do it with Post-its, you can do it in a Word document. Just take a note of all of the kind of IT questions that are out there and what you know that you have. Johan, if you want to talk a little bit more about setting priorities once you have that list.
Yeah, once you have the list, and this isn't like a universal recommendation. There are situations where it doesn't necessarily go in the order that we've listed it here, but in general, in our experience, our recommendation is that the top priorities are with the hardware infrastructure. And for organizations that still have an office that they're going to, that might include the networking, the connection to the internet, wireless networks that provide access for staff in the office. It could include conference room equipment, particularly if your organization is working in a hybrid capacity and needs to be able to have meetings where there are people, joining remotely and also people in the office joining the meeting. It certainly includes computers. And this is one of our big recommendations for organizations, that organizations provide the computing devices for their staff to use. There are probably exceptional cases where that isn't necessary. We have not really run into those ourselves, but I can imagine sort of, theoretically, circumstances where BYOD, bring your own device, is an appropriate approach to providing staff with their computing equipment. But in our experience with small and medium-sized nonprofits, that almost never works out, and the organization is much better off providing laptops generally to their staff, for their staff to work on. And so if you go through that assessment list and you see that all of your laptops, you're either not providing laptops for your staff, you're maybe providing laptops for some staff but not all staff, or the laptops that are being provided are old, they're 5 or 6 years old, that would be something to prioritize, because if the hardware isn't working, nothing else is going to work. And we've seen over and over again situations where organizations are just kind of stuck in the mud with their IT because they haven't prioritized investing in hardware. Once you make those investments, then it really kind of takes you to the next level. And once you've got a good lifecycle workstation, lifecycle replacement plan in place, and we recommend replacing laptops every 3 to 4 years, desktops every 4 to 5 years. So you're basically replacing all of your computer equipment. You're replacing a third to a quarter to 20% of your computer equipment every year. That's our recommended approach, and it becomes part of your ongoing operating budget. Once you've got that system in place and it just kind of is running in maintenance mode almost, and once you've done that for your networking equipment as well, then you can start to focus on your existing services. So the services that you're using for email, also the services that you're using for security. What are you using to protect the data of the organization? Services that you're using for managing projects and initiatives, services that you're using for managing donations and funding, or for program delivery, or for financial management. So basically all of the different organizational functions that your nonprofit has most likely have some IT service corresponding to that organizational function, whether it's something advanced like Razor's Edge for fundraising management, or something simple like a spreadsheet. A lot of organizations will start with using a spreadsheet, which I'm personally a big fan of. I think that can be a great way to start tracking data and information, particularly in an early stage of using an information system, especially for smaller programs. But you need to prioritize making sure that those existing services are paid for, are being well supported, are secure, and are being well managed. And it's possible for a service to be deployed and then not really be managed very well. So you want to identify those services in that assessment and identify those services that may need additional attention. And then once you've prioritized that, you can focus on new initiatives. Are there new programs that that your organization is pursuing that are going to require new IT systems? Or, is there new ways of collaborating? So, a cliche example would be the shift to remote work that happened in 2020 as a result of the pandemic. In a sense, that was a new initiative because it was, for a lot of organizations, it was a whole new way of working. And there was a new IT system that went along with that shift, which was Zoom for a lot of organizations, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet for other organizations. So there was a new way of working, and it had an IT system that needed to be, purchased and deployed and supported and invested in that went along with it. So, and that's a good reminder that, the best laid plans, right? You can put your roadmap together, but the unexpected will come up. The nice thing about having a roadmap is that when the unexpected does arise, you can see how it fits into the overall capacity of your organization to manage IT.
That's a great thing to think about, because I know we had at least one client in 2020 that already had their roadmap in place for going to remote service over the next 4 years. So when they had to approach their funder, I remember they were able to take that to them and do it in like 4 months or something like that. They were compacted what they had been planning to spend on their new equipment and their ability to do this remote service. So it really was helpful to them that they already had the roadmap in place and were able to just take that to their funder and talk about what they already had planned to do. So that's another good thing about having the roadmap in place. But we've been talking kind of abstract about this. So designing an IT roadmap from your priorities. If you are a visual learner, so here we have an example of what, once you've put those priorities in place and thought about those levels that Johan was just talking about, this is an example of what it might look like. So Johan, if you want to talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so the connection here is, you inventory your systems, all of your IT systems, hardware, software, services. You do an assessment of those systems, and then based on that assessment, you develop a list of recommendations. And these are essentially improvements that need to be made. So for example, the first item here, laptop encryption, it's a critical security need that every organization should implement. So maybe you did the assessment, you were looking at your laptops, and as part of that assessment, identified that the laptops aren't encrypted and your staff work from home. So if the laptop gets stolen or lost or misplaced, organizational data may be on the laptop in an unencrypted form. And particularly if you're working with PII, that becomes a disclosure incident, and you have to disclose that the PII that your organization works with was stolen. If the laptops of your staff are encrypted, then the disclosure requirement is no longer
Can you
there.
just remind us what PII is?
Oh, yes, thanks, Carolyn. Personally identifiable information. So, so if you're managing donations and you have your donor's name and address, that's PII. We often, probably the most high-profile example of PII is HIPAA, the health data that exists in electronic medical records. So that's just one example that, in this sample that we've got here, we've listed a variety of different recommendations that were made by whoever put the assessment together, developing, and it's a mix, right? Like some of these are technical tasks that need to be completed. Some of them are improvements to existing services. Some of them are adjacent to IT, to the technology, but essential to using the IT effectively, like developing an IT acceptable use policy, or developing an incident response plan. So once you've developed that, once you've come up with that list of recommendations, then the next step is to prioritize. And we like to categorize recommendations in these 3 different categories of urgency, complexity, and impact. And so urgency is, how important is this? How critical is it? What's the level of risk associated with this recommendation? So for example, laptop encryption, high risk, it's pretty urgent, it needs to happen quickly. Server decommissioning, if you have critical information on an old server that's out of warranty, that's at risk of failure, that's pretty high risk as well. The managed printer solution, that's maybe not as urgent. That could even be low urgency. if no one's really coming into the office. I know the printing is one of those things that can be a lot of work to troubleshoot and fix. And if you don't have a lot of people coming into the office, it may not be worth it. So looking at the urgency is important, and then looking at the complexity, because this really refers to the level of effort that's going to be required to do the work. Because in some cases you may have, you know, and this is just an illustration. So, you know, maybe developing an IT acceptable use policy is highly complex for your organization. If you're a small organization and you already have an employee handbook, you could get a template for the acceptable use policy, put that in place, and you're good to go. So that may be an item of low complexity for your organization. So looking at the complexity is important. And then finally, the impact. And this means impact in the sense, in like a change management sense. What will be the impact on staff? So for example, with laptop encryption, that's something that might require you to touch every laptop. You might need to, have everybody bring their laptop into the office, and you're running encryption, the encryption on the laptop, and it could take a day. So that could be a high, depending on where your staff are located, that could have a high impact. It could be something that's difficult to do. Whereas implementing Office 365 managed backup, that runs behind the scenes. It's not really something that anyone's going to notice, so that has low impact. So it's important to look at these three different categories: urgency, complexity, and impact, because they give you a sense of how quickly do we need to do this, how much effort is going to be required to do this, and what's the impact on the organization of implementing this recommendation. Because complexity or the effort required ultimately comes down to either an in-house person's time or an outsourced provider's costs. So there's budgetary, and resource allocation considerations that need to be taken into account when you're looking at complexity. And you can't do everything at once. So you want to manage or plan out your roadmap so that you're doing the maybe you're pairing like this quarter you're going to do one complex initiative and one less complicated initiative. And by the same token, you also don't want to like plan initiatives that have high impact at times when the organization is really busy. You don't want to do a major migration right before your organization's fundraiser or conference or board meetings. So just making sure that you're looking at, when staff have time to absorb the change that comes from pursuing IT initiatives is going to be important as well.
I think that's something that we're going to touch on a little bit more in the second half, but I wanted to give everyone a kind of a quick quiz here, and that's a perfect segue, Johan, into talking about your IT strategy and your roadmap creation. So do you need an IT roadmap? I hope that people on the webinar will agree that yes, you do. Can you make one yourself, or do you need IT consultants? I think it's kind of mixed. Like, I love the idea that you can just use a spreadsheet. And so depending on the size of your organization, how many staff you have, how complex your IT is, like you may be able to just put that together yourself. But if you do have IT consultants or feel that you need someone with more experience who knows, the landscape and all the different systems that you're using, you could still ask for this in a spreadsheet. In whatever format you're going to get this in, it needs to be something that you can understand and follow. And then we're going to use it later in this presentation to talk about how you create your steps of how you tackle this roadmap. And then what skill set and background does someone need to take on an IT planning role? I hope that the people in this webinar are getting a sense that you need to learn enough about IT so that you can manage it, but you don't need to be an IT person in order to take on an IT planning role. In fact, it's something that leadership at every nonprofit needs to feel responsible for. Your IT is your office. We can't operate without IT. So kind of that idea of putting it like, oh, that's the IT person's job to do that. It's like, well, it's strategic and it's planning and it's budgeting, so it really falls on leadership. So now we're going to go to talk about allocating budget, time, and staff energy. So as a nonprofit, you have 3 really precious resources: your money, your time, and the staff tolerance and ability to absorb change. So kind of your emotional energy. So we're going to talk about your budget and your budget process in a minute. But I wanted to make sure to mention, as I said, leadership responsibility to help staff carve out the time that is needed for change. So are you taking something off of their plate so they can do the projects on the roadmap? How often do they tell you that they need to meet so that it all gets done? And are you as a leader setting a good example for prioritizing time and budget for these changes? So those are all things to think about as we go forward and talk about this. But now we're going to do another poll just to get a feel for how you're doing your budgeting. I'm going to go ahead and read these options now. When you see the poll, they'll be abbreviated. So your first option is finance. Someone in the finance department takes the amount from last year that you spent on IT and increases it. Second option is your leadership meets with all the stakeholders, and together you review your roadmap, your strategic plan, and make the changes and allocate the budget to it that way. 3, your option is when something breaks, we fix it. When someone needs a new tool, their department approves it. The 4th option is we have outsourced IT and they charge us for every little thing. So kind of a situation where you don't totally know what your budget is going to be and what the strategic plan is. Or 5, other or not applicable. I want to make sure to clarify, like some outsourced IT does a situation where they don't tell you exactly what you're paying for. That is not the way that community IT operates. We have very transparent communication with our clients, and we work on strategic plans with them. In fact, that's where a lot of this presentation is coming from today. But some outsourced IT sometimes do that. Okay, it looks like a lot of people have voted, so if we want to go ahead and close the poll, Johan, can you read the results?
Yeah. So 20% of attendees, their finance department takes last year's budget and increases it slightly. 25% have a roadmap review by leadership and stakeholders. 29%, 30% are taking a break fix approach where every department selects its own IT. 10% have outsourced IT, and 20% are using it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. So you can see there's a variety. And as I said earlier, nonprofits they just have a variety of how they approach this. So, all right. So Johan, I think you wanted to talk more about budgeting in these categories.
Yeah, and this comes with a big caveat, which is, one of the things I've learned over the years, having worked with hundreds of nonprofit organizations, is that there are a lot of different approaches to budgeting, a lot of different ways to structure and organize a budget, a lot of different budgeting processes, as we just saw on the previous poll. So this is by no means, this is not meant to be prescriptive. At the end of the day, the budget categories that work best are the ones that are sort of fit into the approach that your organization is already taking to budgeting. But this is intended to sort of be a way of translating, a way of broadly categorizing the things you need to think about budgeting for in your IT, and then that can get translated into the specific format that your organization uses for budgeting. And those 4 categories are personnel, hardware, software, and services. And in fact, the third one is probably one that becoming less and less relevant, I guess, or it's merging with services. Those last 2 are really kind of merging together. But personnel are the people, who's going to be responsible for IT for the organization. And, depending on the size of the organization, that might be an in-house team. It might be a hybrid team involving some in-house and some outsourced IT support, or it may be an outsourced third-party IT support provider. So making sure that you are accounting for those costs in the budget is important. And as Carolyn mentioned earlier, if you have, it's helpful to kind of distinguish between ongoing support costs, like what is required to maintain the status quo, provide routine maintenance on the systems and respond to, incidents and support requests as they come up, and then what's going to be needed for doing some of the major projects and initiatives on top of the ongoing support that's being provided. So it's really helpful to distinguish between those two.
I really love that, you have to do your budget at least annually. And so if you're a little bit worried about, creating an IT roadmap or what IT entails, like the fact that you can kind of bundle it into budgeting, I think can make it easier for people, because as you said earlier, if you know that you have to replace your laptops, a third of them every year, then that's just a budget item that you can put in very easily. But I want to make sure that we get to the issues of change management and the capacity of your nonprofit for change. So I know, Johan, we had a couple, these are kind of our categories that nonprofits that are in these sizes of staff and maturity tend to have similar issues and similar approaches. So if we wanted to talk a little bit about the capacity for change for nonprofits.
Yeah. And these categories are not, there are always exceptions. Like these are sort of generalizations, and your organization may have 15 staff and have been around for 30 years. Or your organization, we work with an organization that's about a year old and has 75 staff. So it varies, but just kind of thinking broadly about like these different size and age categories can be helpful because new organizations can move more quickly. Change management is often easier at smaller organizations because everybody can just get in a room and say how they feel, and you can, in some ways it's easier because you can also just kind of tailor what you're doing to each individual person in the organization. Like you know everybody, you know their names off the top of your head, and you can just think specifically about how do we need to manage this new security training solution for this particular person. And that no longer becomes possible as you start to get above the 15 person sized organization, certainly as you get into the 50, 60 range. Then you start needing to be more cautious in how you deliver new IT solutions and in how you manage IT solutions. And so there's a management requirement that starts to grow with organizations of that size, and that's important to keep in mind with your budgeting. So if you're a growing organization, you want to make sure that you include that personnel budget for management, because once you get to that size, IT isn't just going to run on its own. Someone needs to manage like all of the different parts that go into IT being successful. And then when you get up into the mid-market range, when you have over 100 staff or you're a more mature organization, you have more departments, more stakeholders, then having a more formal change management approach becomes really necessary. And the documentation requirements become more strict at that level, and organizations of that size probably have more formal change management, change request processes for making changes to the system. So understanding your organization, its capacity for change, and how it handles change in non-IT arenas should help influence and inform how you think about implementing an IT roadmap and the change that goes with that in the IT arena.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have some more change management resources on our website as well, but I think, change management for anything is change management, and there are a lot of resources out there. I think sometimes people have like a mental block when it's IT, often because people have had maybe a bad experience in the past with an IT project that didn't go very well, or that where the stakeholders weren't really involved, or it was solving a problem that didn't exist, or some sort of thing like that. So, but if you can kind of clear that barrier and just think about an IT project is just like any other project, and then approach the change management in a similar way. That can really help. But so I think we want to make sure that we get to, so when we looked at the spreadsheet that we looked at earlier with the IT roadmap, where you put in, what the project was, what it was going to do, and its urgency and the impact that it was going to have, there was something missing from that, of course, which was like, how are you actually going to do this? When are you going to undertake the things that you're going to do? So I think, Johan, you're going to talk a little bit more about how to build out a timeline from that IT roadmap.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to those questions of urgency, complexity, and impact, and then matching that up with other things that might be going on in the coming year for your organization. And then, this is just a sample kind of graphical representation of what a timeline might look like. So you basically take the recommendations, the initiatives that came out of the assessment that have now been prioritized and scheduled, and you represent that, in some kind of a timeline. So it's easy to communicate to other stakeholders in the organization when these different things are going to happen. So, for example, in this sample, upgrading the networking equipment at the Washington, D.C. office has been identified as both something that's urgent, not major impact on the staff, and so that was scheduled to happen first. And then the security initiatives were determined to be, the next highest priority. Those are going to have a higher impact on staff. So the password manager was scheduled for the end of the year, but the other security initiatives and the completion of the password manager initiatives, those were pushed into the first quarter of the following year, because a lot of organizations are very busy at the end of the year, closing out their books, sending out final appeals for fundraising. People are getting ready to go away for the holidays. And so you'll notice that in that Q4 column, there's only one initiative. And it could be that the work that's being done at that point is mostly happening in the IT department, and then it's being, delivered to the rest of the organization in the first quarter of the following year. And then there's a lot of back office items that weren't as critical, as some of the other items, like decommissioning the equipment in your data center, for example. Like maybe you're not using that equipment anymore. Depending on the lease at your data center, that may be a high priority item, or we're in the middle of a 2-year lease. All right, well, the equipment's not hurting anybody. We can kind of save that for when we have more time to work on it. So putting the timeline together in that way helps to line up your initiatives with the prioritization that you developed in the earlier part of the process.
I love it. I have a little quibble because I see that the policy issues were moved to be later. And I think for a lot of organizations, like for starters, if you don't have a policy or your policies haven't been updated in a while, like especially if they haven't been updated since you went to remote work or hybrid work, those are definitely, I wouldn't say they're as urgent as maybe some of the security things, but having the policies and making sure that everyone is on board with them and understands why you have policies and what the policies are is really crucial and that can be a good exercise to get leadership really thinking about the rest of your strategy as well. So if you're pulling a group together, a committee, to make sure that your policies are up to date, it can help them start thinking about, well, what is the bring your own device policy and why is it that way? And, other issues around acceptable use when people are working from home. So that can be something that you can use to kind of help jumpstart the process itself.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Carolyn, because theoretically, if you were doing this in an ideal world, the policy would come first, because the policy should drive everything else. Well, strategy comes first, and then policy, and then once the policy is in place, that really helps define what technology solutions you should be implementing. I think one of the challenges, though, with policy is that it often requires the executives to make decisions, like approving the policy. And so now it's as crucial as policy is, and as primary as it is to the process, there are certain dependencies around policy that don't always exist with some of the other initiatives. So,
Exactly.
Yeah,
It can
I
take
would
longer.
say, yeah, it can take longer. Maybe like in this case, it should be like 3 quarters. The
Yeah,
policy
yeah.
work is going to happen over 3 quarters. One quarter to put the policy together, and 2 quarters to convince the C-suite to approve it.
Exactly, exactly. But yeah, I think, making sure that you have policy. And I think, recently, I think we've been seeing a lot with the cybersecurity insurance, that has been helping nonprofits of all sizes see where they have policy gaps, and where they have to upgrade certain security issues, to be able to meet those insurance requirements. Otherwise, they can't get the insurance. So like if they don't have the multi-factor authentication on everybody's accounts, and then they look at it and they're like, oh, we don't even know all of the accounts that people have. Like maybe they've been offboarding staff and they never, deleted those accounts. So it can help spur organizations. It can be another kind of external reason that you can use to convince people that they have to undertake this work to pull the strategy together.
Yeah, totally agree. That's a great point.
Okay, well, let's get to remind everyone of our learning objectives for this presentation. We wanted to help people understand how to set priorities and not be, afraid of setting priorities, and just, you probably already you already know what's going on with IT at your organization, even if you don't know that you know it. So sitting down, making that list, doing it in Word if you need to, and then sitting around and figuring out those priorities, and then how to start designing the IT roadmap from your priorities, put it in a spreadsheet, assign those the urgency, like the impact that it's going to have. Think hard about allocating your budget, maybe use your budget process to help jumpstart making an IT strategy, making sure that you prioritize the time that your staff are going to need to use to put in to build the strategy, and also for any projects that come out of that strategy that then you want to implement. Your staff energy, emotional energy, and time and change management issues around understanding the change management and capacity of your nonprofit and your staff. And then we just covered project timelines and planning steps. So how to start actualizing, going from that list that you had of what you want to do, and then assigning it to the quarters, figuring out like when is the gala, so everyone is going to be preoccupied with that, so we don't want to roll something out right in front of, right when we're having a gala or a report or some other initiative that is organization-wide. So that's what we had for the learning objectives. And I think, Johan, thank you so much. I think we really hit on a lot of them. And we have all of our past webinars on our website as well. As I said, we have a podcast, we have a YouTube channel as well. So now I want to open it up to questions. And I think we did have a question in chat. Monica, did you want to read that?
Yes, thank you, Carolyn and Johan. It's referring to that sample timeline that you shared in a couple of slides ago, but they were wondering, what did you use to create it? Was it Excel? And they just said it was very clear and easy to read.
This, I think, was created, don't quote me on this, I think it was in Lucidchart. So that's a online, it's kind of like you can make diagrams and other sort of visual business documents in Lucidchart, and they have a ton of templates that you can use. So I think this could have been created, it certainly looks like it could have been created in Excel. You could certainly create this in Excel. I think it may have been created in Lucidchart using a template.
Yeah, no, I think you could definitely do it in a spreadsheet. If you wanted to just take that spreadsheet that you came up with your roadmap to begin with, where we put in the urgency and the impact, you could, build that out as well with who is the point person for the different those different tasks, and then you could build out when you were planning for that to happen as well. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but yeah, I think this is a really good visual. For those of you who are listening, we will have this visual in our transcript on our website, and I think it'll be in the video on the Nonprofit Learning Labs website as well.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have a couple more questions. Someone was wondering, they said we have a very small organization and we don't prioritize designing our website and managing it. Would you recommend getting a website consultant?
Well, Carolyn handles our website, so I was wondering, Carolyn, if you want to answer this.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, because a website is technically IT, but it usually falls more in the marketing, sometimes under the development department as well. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that if you have stakeholders that are feeling like they don't have the technical skills, or just for whatever reason have a barrier to prioritizing it, yeah, there are a bunch of consultants out there. There are website organizations that build websites that are focused really on nonprofits. So yeah, I would recommend, sometimes also with a barrier like that, it can be helpful to bring in an outsider. And if you got someone who did an assessment of your existing website and was able to present to the people at your organization the ways it could be better, sometimes that can help people kind of kickstart at wanting to make an update.
And I would just add, I think one thing to think about is the functionality of the website. So very simple websites that are just presenting information about your organization are going to be pretty inexpensive to create. Yeah. Websites where you're maybe providing information, where you're delivering program through the website or member services, those are going to start to get more complex and much more expensive. So starting off with that sort of understanding of what's the function of the website, I think will help to guide you towards, if it's a more advanced need, even if you're a small organization, then you might need a firm. And if it's just providing information, then an independent consultant might be sufficient.
Mm-hmm. I think also, again, with leadership and prioritization, if you have someone in your organization that's responsible for the website, but they're not getting the time that they need to be able to keep it up to date, that might be a different issue. And then the last thing I'll say is that there's a lot of security around websites as well. So you don't want your website to be hacked or taken over with ransomware. So that's another reason maybe to go to an expert to make sure that your site is secure.
Great.
Was there another question?
There was. I think this will be our final question. Someone was wondering, what kind of education and/or resources would you suggest for nonprofits providing their staff to avoid cybersecurity incidents?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'm doing the website for Community IT. We have a bunch of free webinars and other articles and tips and other resources, links to other resources as well that can help you out. And Johan, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull it up, but I will share it with a Nonprofit Learning Lab. Matt just recently mentioned as well the national website around cybersecurity for small businesses that has a ton of free resources as well. Do you remember the name of it?
No, I forget, the name escapes me.
I'll have to pull it up and share it with you later. I'm sorry I don't have it on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources online. I mean, we did a webinar a year or two ago about developing a cybersecurity training curriculum. So you could go to our site and check out that webinar. TechSoup has put a lot of focus on cybersecurity. They have paid training courses, not for staff, but for someone who's developing training for their staff. And then there's also solutions We typically recommend KnowBe4, which started off as a fake spear phishing solution. So you could kind of check on how likely it is that your staff would click on a phishing, email. But they've really expanded into providing almost like a security learning management system, where they also have like trainings that they keep updated that you can assign to staff and manage. So, and there are other solutions in addition to KnowBe4 that provide that as well. We consider to be a pretty reasonable fee, because at the end of the day, like the biggest threat to most organizations as far as security goes are the staff. You're probably not going to have like hackers trying to hack into your computers. You're going to have criminals trying to steal money from your organization.
And you're going to trick your staff into clicking on something. Exactly.
Great, thank you. That will conclude this Q&A portion. Thank you, Carolyn and Johan. This workshop has come to a close. Thank you so much for participating. And again, thank you, Carolyn and Johan, for educating our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.